My name is Noelle Kincaid, 32 years old. The restaurant was one of those places where even the air smelled expensive. Aged wood, seared steak, and wine, so fine it whispered rather than poured. Waiters in tuxedos glided between tables like stagehands, choreographing an evening that wasn't quite what it seemed. My brother Mike had picked the place, which should have been my first warning. Mike never paid for dinner, let alone picked spots where appetizers came with four-digit guilt. "Order anything you want," he said grandly, flashing that salesman grin that could sell frost to winter. "Tonight's on me. We're celebrating." Across the table, our parents practically glowed. Mom had that performative smile she used at fundraisers, all teeth and tension. Dad's cufflinks gleamed, the little silver towers he wore whenever he expected to be seen. Jennifer, my sister, adjusted her wineglass for the perfect reflection. Even Uncle Paul, who rarely approved of anything, seemed impressed. "Celebrating what?" I asked. My tone was polite, neutral, the same tone I used when interrogating suspects who didn't know they were suspects yet. Mike just smirked. "Let's eat first. I want to do this properly." I should have left then. Should have seen the script forming, the way he paused before every punchline. But exhaustion has a way of dulling intuition. The thought of going home to my quiet apartment and microwave leftovers kept me seated. We ordered. Mike, as always, went for prime rib. Bloody, theatrical. Dad chose filet mignon, Mom, salmon. I picked the chicken, the cheapest item, and tried to ignore Mike's smirk. "Still cautious," Jennifer teased. "You never splurge. That's your problem, Noelle. You forget to live." "I live fine," I said. Mom's voice softened with rehearsed concern. "You're 32, sweetheart. Tiny apartment, old car, same job forever. We just worry you're stuck." Mike leaned back, glass in hand. "She's not stuck, Mom. She's fossilized. Same routine, same paycheck. Meanwhile, the rest of us are actually living." Dad chuckled. Mike just closed his biggest deal, 3 commercial properties. Mike grinned wider. "Family support makes all things possible." Something in his tone chilled me. That line had weight, like a hook waiting for bait. The food arrived, immaculate. Conversation simmered, with low-level jabs disguised as banter. Mike, radiant with ego, dominated every story. I watched, detached, almost like I was surveilling them from behind glass. When dessert came, I declined. "Predictably," Mike commented. "Still worried about money?" He cracked his creme brulee with unnecessary force. "She hoards every cent like it's a war ration, probably still clipping coupons." "There's nothing wrong with being responsible," I said evenly. "Responsible?" He laughed. "Is that what you call having $2.3 million sitting in a savings account earning 0 interest? Because I call that stupid." My fork froze midair. "How do you know what's in my account?" I asked. He reached into his jacket and produced a folded paper, proud as a magician revealing the final card. "Because I checked. Had to verify before I made the transfer." "What transfer?" He unfolded the paper like a flag. "Your money, finally put to use. Down payment on a real estate investment, $11.5 million total. You provided the capital. I provided the brains. 60-40 split. You get 40% for doing nothing. You're welcome." Silence crashed over the table. "You did what?" My voice stayed level, the training kicking in, the ice sealing over the shock. "I made an executive decision," he said. "Family helps family. You're too scared to take risks, so I took one for you." Mom clasped her hands, radiant. "That's wonderful, honey. See, Noelle? Mike's making your money work." Dad nodded approval. Better than letting it rot in savings. I looked down at my phone under the table. 3 notifications flashed across the secure channel. Transfer detected. Tracking initiated. Stand by. Suspect account identified. Funds frozen. Team deployed. Maintain position. I set the phone face down. "You accessed my account 3 times? 4, actually. Had to get around the daily transfer limit." "You said the bank called?" "They did. I told them it was an investment. They bought it." "That," I said, "is called fraud." He laughed, uneasy now. "Don't be dramatic." Uncle Paul cleared his throat. "Come on, Noelle. He did you a favor. Now you're part of something bigger." "Generous, really," Mom added. 60-40 when he's doing the work? That's fair. I looked up. "That account isn't my personal savings." Mike blinked. "What?" "It's not my money." "What are you talking about?" "It's evidence," I said quietly. "A federal evidence account maintained by the FBI." The color drained from his face. "I'm the custodian of record," I continued. "I work for the Bureau. That account is tagged and monitored. The moment you touched it, every system lit up. You're joking. I'm not. Around us, the restaurant's sound faded to a single heartbeat. Then the door opened. 4 agents entered, scanning the room. Rebecca Torres, badge visible, approached the table. That's him? She asked. That's him, I said. Michael Kincaid. He initiated the transfers. Mom's voice broke. You called the FBI? On your own brother? I didn't have to. The system did. Rebecca stepped forward. Michael Kincaid, you're under arrest for theft of federal evidence, bank fraud, identity theft, and obstruction of justice. Stand up, please. Dad lunged up. Wait, there's a misunderstanding. Sit down, sir, another agent warned. Mike's bravado collapsed. Noelle, please, tell them it was a mistake. You planned it for days, I said softly. Transferred over $2 million without consent. That's not a mistake. As Rebecca recited his rights, the restaurant froze. People stared over wine glasses, forks suspended midair. My family's celebration had become a public spectacle. Mike turned to me, voice trembling. I was trying to help you. No, I said. You were trying to steal from me and call it love. Rebecca led him out in cuffs. Cameras on phones glimmered like fireflies. I exhaled slowly, the way I'd been trained, to ground myself after crisis. Then I saw it. Dad's expression. Not horror, not disbelief. Something else. His eyes flicked to Mike, then away, fast, guilty. A silent understanding passed between them. It was small, but unmistakable. I'd seen that look in interrogation rooms before, when an accomplice realizes the game might reach him next. And as the agents disappeared through the doorway with my brother, I felt the first quiet tremor of a new question forming in my mind. What exactly had Dad known before tonight? The field office at night has a sound I've never been able to describe, something between a hum and a held breath, the building listening to itself. Rebecca took me to interview B, the small, windowless room with the table polished to an almost ceremonial shine. She placed a tablet in front of me and slid over a sealed evidence pouch with the printed chain of custody strip running across it like a caution bandage. Whenever you're ready, she said. It's always a strange split when I'm both a witness and a professional. My mind becomes a pair of gears that have to turn in perfect rhythm. One gear to feel nothing so I don't drop details, one to feel just enough that I remember why details matter. I began at the beginning. Time of arrival. Time the menu was handed to me. The wording of Mike's first line. The order of entrees. The lighting in the booth. The exact brand of credit card the waiter flashed in his palm like stage direction when he whispered that Mr. Kincaid had arranged everything. Every line of dialogue that mattered. Every qualifier he used when he justified the theft. Help, family, executive decision. I recorded his admissions in precise sequence. First login, second, third, fourth, the call to the bank, his exact phrase, they bought it. Rebecca's stylus moved only twice, to mark an asterisk and then to underline it. She waited until I said, "That's everything," before speaking. You noticed something between your father and Mike. Yes, I said, a look. Describe it. Recognition, not surprise, not what have you done. It was we are here now. Rebecca considered me for a long second, then tapped the tablet and added one line. Subject observed nonverbal indication of prior knowledge between Michael Kincaid and father. She didn't look triumphant. She looked grave. We'll request voluntary interviews. I'm not holding my breath. I know. She hesitated. You want me to bring someone else in for your statement? Conflict-wise? I'm fine, I said, and meant it the way you say I'm fine when you've trained for the exact moment you're living. This is clean. Clean enough, she said. Eat something. You're shaking. I hadn't realized I was. I signed, sealed my statement, and walked to the kitchenette where the coffee tastes like scorched resolve. I drank water instead, listening to the building's held breath and the faint squeak of someone's shoes down a hall. On the desk beside me, a bulletin about holiday fishing campaigns curled at the corners. There's always a scam in season. By the time I left the office, the restaurant had been reabsorbed into the night, the spectacle swallowed. The street was glossy, with a recent rinse of drizzle. My car's interior smelled like clean fabric and winter gum. The first voicemail on my phone was my mother's, already crying, her words a river of broken syllables that somehow still found time to accuse. How could you, your brother, your own blood? The second was Dad's, his voice a low, steely thing I recognized from childhood when he wanted his disappointment to feel like a wall you couldn't climb. He said my name only once, Noelle. The rest was implication. Fix this. The third voicemail was Jennifer, not crying, not even angry, cool, surgical. You always did like rules more than people, she said, as if it were a personality trait that could be gently mocked at parties. But this has consequences for all of us. If you care at all, you will make this go away. She hung up without saying goodbye. I drove to my apartment because ritual is a rope you grip when the ground tilts. I took off my shoes in the same square of entryway, placed my keys in the same ceramic bowl, turned on the same single lamp that gentled the edges of the room. The quiet was a relief, the kind that isn't peace so much as the absence of other people's noise. I showered until the water lost its heat and stood there after, palms on tile, forehead bowed to nothing in particular, feeling the fatigue stretch like a second skin. When I stepped out, my secure line buzzed. A departmental memo, flagged internal. Anomaly review report. Login artifact correlation. The preview text. Home network signature associated with parental residence detected in proximity to credential artifact used in subsequent unauthorized access. I opened it and pulled the thread. A month before the first transfer, a device associated with my parents' home network had pinged an old cookie tied to my banking login. Nothing actionable then, just a faint trace that the system automatically noted and filed under low priority because people carry their digital crumbs everywhere and houses accumulate them. But the trace wasn't random. The device had lingered on the banking landing page, then navigated to a help article, then to a separate tab with daily transfer limits in the URL. It didn't have my credentials. It didn't need to. It was scouting the terrain. The device name was generic, HP Home Printer. The MAC address wasn't. I saved it. The next morning, I wore a gray suit and a face that had practiced neutrality into muscle memory. I stopped for coffee and paid for the indulgence of a croissant because the body negotiates with the mind in small currencies. When I arrived at my parents' house, the landscaping was exact and the front door glossy enough to show me back myself, a woman who looked like the daughter they claimed but did not entirely own. Mom opened before I knocked, as if she'd been staged behind the door waiting for her cue. Her mascara wore grief like a costume. "Come in," she said, and her voice added a flinch. "We need to talk about what you did." The living room was arranged for confrontation. Dad in the armchair nearest the fireplace, Jennifer at the end of the couch like a beautiful verdict, Uncle Paul with his arms folded and his gaze on the mantel, as if avoiding mine, made him the reasonable adult in the room. The air smelled like lemon polish, and a candle labeled something nameless like estate. Dad started. "You embarrassed us." "Mike committed multiple felonies," I said calmly. "He embarrassed himself." "He made a mistake," Mom said. "He thought he was helping you invest." "Dad," I said, eyes on him, "did you know anything about this before last night?" He didn't flinch. He leaned back into that armchair as if it had been made to contain a man who was always right. "I knew he was working on a big deal," he said. "He told me he had capital lined up." "From where?" "Not my concern," he said, and smiled the way men smile when they think they've found the angle that keeps them clean. "Did you access my bank account?" I asked him, and then to the room. "Did anyone here, on the home network, visit my banking site last month? Read about transfer limits?" Mom's eyes widened in that theatrical way she had when she wanted outrage to stand in for innocence. "How dare you?" "Answer," I said, and I kept my voice low, because low travels farther. Uncle Paul snorted softly. "You really think a couple of old folks are pulling James Bond on your accounts?" Jennifer spoke without looking at me. "You see, this is what I mean. You make everything an investigation." "It is an investigation," I said, "and I'm asking because someone did reconnaissance from this network." Dad's smile thinned. "Even if someone read something on a website, reading is not a crime." "Context is," I said, "and reading is exactly what you do when you're preparing to commit one." He stood, sudden and stiff, the performative father whose sternness had stopped being persuasive the year I realized I could live without his approval. "You will fix this," he said. "You will call your people and make this misunderstanding go away." "I won't," I said. "I can't. And if I could, I still wouldn't. The system runs because people don't get to switch it off when it's inconvenient." "Family is not inconvenient," Mom whispered. tears trembled on cue. Family is everything. Not when family uses it as a mask for theft, I said. Not when family confuses helping with taking. That's not family. That's cover. Jennifer finally looked at me. You're choosing strangers over us. I'm choosing the law over your comfort, I said. If you left a door unlocked and a neighbor walked into your house and carried out your jewelry, you wouldn't call it help. You'd call it what it is. You'd call the police. Get out, Dad said. It wasn't a shout. It was a judgment. Gladly, I said. And then, because I could feel my hands start to shake again, I added a detail to hold on to. The check at the restaurant came to $847 and change. I paid it. You're welcome. On my way to the door, I paused at the console table where Mom kept her perfect stack of magazines and a ceramic dish of matches no one ever struck. Beneath the dish was a sticky note, a phone number, a name, Branson Escrow. I took a photo. Uncle Paul saw me see it. His mouth flattened. Outside, the air felt merciful. I sat in my car and let the seat hold me up while my phone buzzed against my palm with a new, secure message. I opened it and watched the letters line up into a sentence that seemed almost too on the nose for real life. Additional artifact correlation. Voice auth test calls made to bank's automated system originating from parental landline. Caller-navigated prompts using phrases consistent with subject's speech patterns, captured in historical voicemail. Someone had practiced being me. I looked at the house. Behind those windows, my family was already revising history, workshopping the lines they would say to friends who asked. We tried. She didn't. We begged. She wouldn't. The new narrative would be ready by dinner. The world loves a tidy role, the difficult daughter, the golden son. Only the truth refused to fit. I drove. Back roads until the city lights loosened. The night smelled like damp stone and cold metal and a small strip of river. I pulled over where the guardrail faced the water and let the engine tick itself quiet. Some part of me wanted to cry, not for grief, but for pressure release, the way pressure valves hiss when they do their job. Instead, I breathed, counted the breath in, held, counted it out, in, hold, out. It steadied, that simple math. When I could trust my hands again, I texted Rebecca the artifact highlights and the photo of the sticky note. Her reply came quickly. Good catch. We'll subpoena records for the landline and the escrow office. Don't engage further today. Copy, I wrote, and then I stared at the word engage until it blurred. That was always the test in these cases. The line between addressing and absorbing. You can address a fire. If you absorb it, you become fuel. The next ping wasn't from Rebecca. It was from a system daemon with a sense of timing that bordered on cosmic. New event. Anomaly cluster upgraded to active review. Home network device, HP home printer, relabeled bridge. I read the note twice. Bridge. The exact word Dad had used. Bridge capital. Not proof, not yet. But the universe sometimes left fingerprints in word choice. I put the car in gear, turned back toward the city, and let the road stitch itself under me. Somewhere ahead, the path would narrow to a single necessary step, deciding how far to follow the breadcrumb trail when it led, as it often does, straight through people you once called home. I didn't know what I would do when I reached that step. I only knew this. I would not pretend the trail wasn't there. The trial began 8 months later, though the real sentencing had started long before, back in that restaurant when the word family lost its shape. Courtrooms always smell faintly of paper and expectation. The air is cold on purpose, designed to keep people alert, honest, afraid. I sat at the witness table under lights that erased all softness, my hands folded neatly, my pulse measured in silent beats. Mike avoided my eyes. He wore a suit that didn't fit quite right, too large across the shoulders, as if he were still trying to grow into the man he pretended to be. The prosecutor's voice was steady, surgical. Agent Kincaid, please describe your position at the time of the incident. Senior Digital Forensics Analyst, Cybercrime Unit, I said. And your relationship to the defendant? My brother. The word landed heavy. Across the room, Mom cried quietly into a tissue that never tore. Dad sat rigid beside her, jaw tight, eyes fixed on the floor as though watching a movie he'd already seen and wished would end differently. They projected the bank transfers on the screen. 3 days, 4 transactions, timestamps, IP addresses, authorization logs. Mike's voice filled the room in a recorded call with the bank, impersonating me. Hearing it out loud made the betrayal feel physical. When the defense tried to reframe it as ignorance, a misunderstanding between siblings, the prosecutor replayed the line where Mike said, "They bought it." The jury didn't flinch. They didn't need to. The evidence spoke. I told the truth, every sterile fact. I didn't mention the look between Mike and Dad. I didn't mention the metadata or the bridge device still under review. Not yet. The Bureau preferred airtight cases to messy truths. Rebecca testified next, walking through procedure, surveillance, and trace verification. Then came the witnesses from the restaurant: Jennifer, Mom, Uncle Paul, all polished, all nervous. Jennifer's testimony was the most rehearsed. "Mike was trying to help her," she said. "Noelle always hides behind her rules." The prosecutor let her hang there for a beat before asking, "And did you know about the transfers before that night?" Jennifer hesitated too long. "No." When the cross-examination ended, she walked past me without a glance. Mike's lawyer built a last defense around motive. He believed it was his sister's money, he insisted. He lacked criminal intent. The judge, a woman whose patience felt like the edge of a blade, leaned forward. "Ignorance of ownership does not absolve theft, counsel, especially when the theft was planned and executed over multiple days." By the time the verdict came, guilty on all counts, I was beyond relief. It was inevitability wearing formality's suit. The judge sentenced him to 15 years in federal prison. Mom sobbed openly. Dad just stared. When it was over, Rebecca found me in the corridor. "You did well," she said. "I did my job," I replied. Her eyes softened. "That's not always the same thing." The fallout wasn't cinematic, it was relentless. For the first week, my phone became a confessional for their anger. Mom's messages alternated between pleading and cursing. Dad's were clipped, surgical strikes. "You've ruined us." Jennifer's voice notes carried venom disguised as heartbreak. "You chose strangers over your blood." Uncle Paul left one message that lasted 3 minutes and contained exactly one coherent line. "You'll regret this." The FBI took that seriously enough to add a quiet protective monitor to my address. After the 15th voicemail, I changed my number. When the emails came, they were worse. "Mom, how can you live knowing your brother's in prison because of you?" "Dad, you're not our daughter anymore." Jennifer, "His kids won't have a father because of you." I read them once each, then archived them. You don't delete family. You store it somewhere unreachable. Time passed, measured by case files, not birthdays. Work filled the gaps. Promotions came. Slow, deserved, uncelebrated. I moved to a quiet townhouse in Virginia, planted rosemary by the kitchen window, bought a couch that didn't creak. The silence was no longer sharp. It became shape. Sometimes, though, in the thin hour between sleep and duty, I replayed that glance between Mike and Dad. I'd tell myself it didn't matter. Case closed, justice served. But the human mind is a poor lockbox. It leaves windows open. One night, while compiling archival case notes, a notification blinked across my encrypted inbox. Sender: L. Sandoval, retired bureau mentor. Subject: your brother's deposition tapes. Inside was a note, something in his language pattern, worth another listen. Curiosity is both asset and flaw in my profession. I opened the files. Mike's recorded deposition played through the small desk speaker. I'd heard parts before, but this was the unedited cut. Between the stammers and self-pity, there was one stray comment I'd missed. "I didn't figure out the bank thing on my own," he told his lawyer off record. Dad said he knew a way to make it work. Said he had bridge capital covered. Bridge. Again. I paused the file, hands cold. That word had been haunting the metadata since the first day. When I flagged it to Rebecca, she didn't look surprised. "We found the same phrase in escrow documentation," she said quietly. "But nothing we can prosecute. It's circumstantial." "Maybe," I said, "but words are fingerprints." She studied me. "Do you want to keep digging?" "I don't know yet." The years turned. The edges of outrage dulled, replaced by distance. Mom and Dad moved west, telling neighbors I'd died in a car accident. Jennifer married someone in real estate, a symmetry that wasn't lost on me. The Bureau shifted focus to new cases. I became assistant section chief, which mostly meant fewer field days, more politics. The work stayed honest even when people didn't. 3 years after sentencing, a letter arrived from my parents' estate lawyer. They were gone. Heart attacks, 6 months apart. He enclosed a copy of the will. I wasn't surprised that everything went to Jennifer. What caught me was the clause written in my father's voice. Our daughter Noelle is to receive nothing, having proven herself devoid of loyalty, compassion, or family values. It was signed 2 weeks after Mike's arrest. There was a witness signature beneath it. Neat, businesslike. I knew that name. It belonged to Uncle Paul's bookkeeper, a man whose reputation in local circles was whispered in euphemisms. Discretionary accountant, document cleaner, bridge fund consultant. Bridge, again. Rebecca's words echoed back. Do you want to keep digging? I closed the folder. For the first time in years, I didn't know. Because justice, I'd learned, was clean on paper, but messy in blood. Outside, dusk spread over the neighborhood like a bruise turning to shadow. A child somewhere laughed. High, bright, oblivious. I envied that sound, the purity of a world still convinced family means safety. I framed the clause from the will and hung it above my desk, not as bitterness, but as memory, a compass calibrated to loss. Every morning before work, I'd glance at it, a silent reminder that integrity often costs everything. Still, some nights, when the building settled and the world felt too quiet, I could almost hear Mike's voice again. Not the arrogance, but something underneath it, something that had almost sounded like fear. And always, in that echo, a question I'd never stopped asking myself. If blood is supposed to bind, what do you call it when it burns instead? Mike served 11 years before the system finally released him back into daylight. By then, most of what we'd shared as siblings existed only in the case files. I didn't track his release date. The Bureau's internal updates did that for me. The message came one afternoon, tucked inside a monthly operations bulletin. Subject, Kincaid, Michael. Status, released. Federal supervision initiated. I read it once, closed the window, and went back to work. A week later, a letter arrived at headquarters. Plain envelope, no return address. My name written in block letters so careful it looked foreign. It had been forwarded through official channels. Noelle, it began. I don't expect you to read this. I wouldn't if I were you, but I need to write it anyway. He wrote about prison time the way other people describe weather, unavoidable, relentless, sometimes briefly merciful. He wrote about long hours thinking, about watching younger inmates come and go while he stayed, about realizing that his entire life had been built on taking from people who gave too easily. You were right, he said. You always were. I told myself I was helping you because it was easier than admitting I envied you. You had what I couldn't fake: control, integrity. I used to think those things were dull, but they're the only currency that lasts when everything else collapses. He mentioned Dad only once. He said he could make things right, that he had bridge money to fix it. I believed him. I shouldn't have. Bridge, again. I set the letter down and stared at the word until it blurred. I thought about all the ways that word had followed me. Metadata logs, escrow filings, witness signatures. I'd spent years convincing myself the case was finished. But cases don't end. They just go quiet. That night, I reopened the old internal file, the one flagged inactive but monitored. The metadata string was still there. HP home printer, bridge. I scrolled through archived network logs. 6 weeks before Mike's first transfer, someone had used a voice print simulator from that same network to test my bank's phone menu, mimicking phrases from my old voicemails. Mike didn't have the skill for that. Dad barely knew how to reset Wi-Fi. Someone else had helped. I sent Rebecca a message. Need a favor, off record. She replied within minutes. Still chasing ghosts? Maybe, I typed. Just need confirmation. We met at a diner halfway between her new posting and mine, a quiet place where nobody cared who you were as long as you tipped. She was older now, laugh lines deeper, but her eyes hadn't changed, the steady kind that weighed truth before believing it. I handed her the printed logs and the copy of the will's witness page. She studied them both. Uncle Paul's bookkeeper, she murmured. This signature is identical to one from a shell company tied to an escrow wash case we closed last year. Could he have helped them? He could have trained them, she said. He ran digital fronts for half the state's developers. Wouldn't be the first time he blurred legality. Then why not investigate? She looked at me for a long time. Because both your parents are dead, Paul's in a nursing facility after his stroke, and the bookkeeper vanished. You can chase shadows, but there's no courtroom left to hold them. I nodded. So it dies there. Unless you want to resurrect it, she said softly. But resurrection's messy. It never gives closure, just more noise. We sat in silence for a while. Outside, the streetlights blinked awake one by one, halos in the fog. Rebecca finally smiled, tired but kind. For what it's worth, I still think you did the right thing. Sometimes the right thing still feels wrong, I said. That's how you know it's right, she replied. I drove home along the river. The city lights reflected off the water like confessions no one had the courage to keep. My house looked smaller that night, quieter. On the wall above my desk, the framed clause from the will still hung, without loyalty, compassion, or family values. I took it down. In its place, I hung an empty frame. No picture, no words, just space. Later, I sat by the window with Mike's letter in my lap, reading it again, slower this time. There was one line near the end that caught me off guard. Understanding isn't forgiveness, but it's the first door you can open without hating what's on the other side. I stared at that sentence until the words softened into something like peace. I opened a fresh page on my computer and started typing. Mike, I wrote, I don't know if this will reach you. Maybe it doesn't need to. But you're right. Understanding isn't forgiveness. It's acknowledgement. You took something from me once, but you also gave me clarity. I learned that blood alone doesn't define family. Integrity does. Accountability does. I hope you find both. I printed it, folded it, and placed it beside his letter. I didn't mail it. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Some doors are meant to stay half open. The next morning, the world looked ordinary again. Sunlight on the kitchen tile, coffee percolating, the faint hum of a lawnmower from a neighbor's yard. Ordinary, but lighter. As I left for work, I glanced once more at the empty frame. It caught the light just right, gleaming like possibility. For the first time in years, I didn't feel alone, just free. Because real family values aren't loyalty without limits or love without truth. They are integrity when no one claps for you, honesty when silence would be easier, and the courage to walk away from what breaks you, even when it bears your name.